The wind cut through the valley with the kind of cold that made breath visible, and Amanda Cole held her daughter's mittened hand tighter as they climbed the courthouse steps. Winter light fell in sharp angles across the stone, and the crowd of potential buyers huddled against the chill, their breath rising like ghosts. Lily, 8 years old, looked up at her mother with eyes that had learned too much too soon, the kind of understanding children shouldn't have to carry. 3 months ago, Amanda had been Amanda Hayes, a nurse with a steady paycheck, a comfortable apartment outside Denver, a life that made sense. Then her husband's gambling had stripped that away. The debts came first, then the lies, then the disappearance with what little remained of their savings. She'd sold her car, her furniture, everything but Lily's favorite storybooks. Now she stood at a courthouse auction with $28 in her wallet and a daughter who needed a home. Before we continue, please support us and hit the subscribe button and motivates us create more powerful stories. Now let's dive in. The auctioneer's voice boomed across the frozen lawn, announcing properties one by one. Tax-seized homes. Foreclosed farms. With each call, the bids climbed, $2,000 here, $5,000 there, far beyond anything Amanda could reach. She watched as investors and locals with actual money claimed their deals, and she remained, clutching the county list, searching for anything within her desperate reach. Perhaps it was simple survival. They had nowhere to go after the motel money ran out next week. Or perhaps it was the stubborn, bone-deep determination that had carried her through the separation, the refusal to accept that there wasn't some way forward for them. The auctioneer's voice cut through the cold. Lot 17. Coldwater Ridge cabin, 5 acres, no utilities. Property abandoned since the blizzard of 1989. Opening bid, $500. Silence fell over the crowd. Even the bargain hunters seemed uninterested in a pile of rotting timber miles from nowhere. Amanda's heart sank. This was it, the last property on the list. The auctioneer repeated the opening bid, watching for raised hands. None came. He lowered it. $200. Anyone? Still nothing. $100. Do I have $100? The crowd remained unmoved, and Amanda felt something shift inside her chest. A sudden, inexplicable certainty, like the moment in the air when you just know a patient will make it. The auctioneer's voice held a note of frustration now. $50. Does anyone bid $50 for this property? The county needs it off the tax rolls. Amanda stepped forward, her voice steady despite her racing heart. I'll take it. The crowd turned. A man in an expensive wool coat smirked, whispering something to his companion that drew a laugh. The auctioneer squinted in her direction. I'm sorry, ma'am. What's your bid? Amanda straightened her shoulders, ignoring the heat creeping up her neck. $10. Laughter rippled through the gathered crowd, polite, dismissive. $10 for a 5-acre property with a cabin? The auctioneer's tone suggested she'd lost her mind. Ma'am, there's no heat, no plumbing, no structure at all. That place has been rotting since 1989. You'd be better off sleeping in your car. Amanda met his gaze steadily, thinking of Lily's eyes in the motel room, the thin walls carrying other people's despair, the slow erosion of her daughter's hope. She thought of the nurse who'd raised her 3 kids alone in a studio apartment, who taught her that home wasn't a place, it was something you fought for. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is bet everything on nothing at all, Amanda said quietly. I have $10. And you have no other bidders. The auctioneer conferred briefly with a county official. The man in the wool coat shook his head and walked away, dismissing her with a wave. Sold, the auctioneer said finally. $10. Please see the clerk for paperwork. As Amanda fumbled in her purse for a $10 bill, nearly a quarter of her remaining wealth, Lily tugged at her sleeve. Mom, are we really going to live in that cabin? Amanda pressed the rusted key and tattered deed into her pocket, feeling the weight of it. The courthouse had been so certain she was mad. The crowd had laughed. But standing there on the courthouse steps with her daughter's hand in hers, Amanda felt something she hadn't felt in months. A choice that was hers alone. Yes, she told Lily, though she wasn't entirely sure if she'd just found their salvation or made the biggest mistake of her life. We're going to Coldwater Ridge. And we're going to make it ours. The drive took 2 hours, the last 40 minutes on a rutted dirt road that threatened to shake their aging Honda apart. With each mile, what little remained of civilization fell away. First the suburbs, then the small towns, then even the scattered farmhouses. Nothing remained but dense forest, bare trees with their limbs reaching like skeletal fingers, and the occasional dirt track branching off into darkness. Amanda gripped the steering wheel tighter, ignoring the warning signals from her rational mind. This was madness. She'd brought her daughter to the wilderness with no plan beyond a desperate gamble on a $10 shelter. David would have used it against her, more evidence of her impulsive decision-making that he'd cited during custody hearings. She can't provide stability, he'd said. Can't think rationally under pressure. The GPS lost signal 20 minutes ago. Now they navigated by the crude map the county clerk had sketched on the back of their deed. Left at the twin pine trees, she'd written, "Follow the valley down. Cabins at the ridge." Beside her, Lily pressed her face against the window, unusually quiet. The motel had been bad, thin walls carrying arguments, the constant weight of dwindling funds, the smell of other people's despair seeping through cheap varnish. But at least it had electricity. Running water. A connection to the world they knew. This felt like driving off the edge of the map. The track curved sharply around a massive outcropping of stone, and suddenly their new home appeared through the trees. Amanda's heart sank. Cabin was a generous description for the structure before them. A small single-story building with a sagging roof and boarded windows. The porch listed dangerously to one side, rotted steps leading up to a door secured with a rusted padlock. The chimney was half collapsed, and what might have once been a garden had returned to wild, knee-high grass and scattered branches. Snow had drifted against the foundation, and ice hung from the eaves like frozen teeth. "Well," Lily said, her voice careful and neutral in a way that broke Amanda's heart, "it's definitely a cabin." Amanda forced a smile, refusing to let her daughter see the doubt pooling in her chest. "It's a fixer-upper. But it's ours. No rent, no mortgage, no one can take it away. Just a place to catch our breath and figure out what comes next." She parked the car and they approached cautiously, stepping over fallen branches and weeds that had consumed the property. Amanda tried the padlock, finding it solid despite the rust. The key from the county clerk, an old iron thing that looked like something from a historical museum, fit surprisingly well. The lock opened with a reluctant screech. The smell hit them first. Musty air thick with decades of abandonment, underlaid with something older, decay, perhaps, or secrets. Amanda pushed the door wider, letting pale winter lights spill into the dim interior. The cabin's interior was a graveyard of forgotten lives. Dust hung in the air like suspended time. A collapsed chair lay on its side. The remnants of a wood stove, half buried in debris, sat against the far wall. Frost coated the edges of the boarded windows, and the floorboards creaked ominously under Amanda's cautious step. But as her eyes adjusted to the dim light, she saw something that made her pause. On one wall, near where a fireplace should have been, carved letters caught her lantern's glow. J.M., 1989. Don't let it take you. Amanda's breath caught. She ran her fingers across the engraving, the wood smooth beneath her touch from decades of passing hands. The carving was deep, deliberate. Someone had taken time with this, had wanted to leave a mark that would outlast them. "Mom." Lily's voice was small, frightened. "Who's J.M.?" Amanda didn't answer. She didn't know yet that she'd just stepped into someone else's unfinished story. She didn't know that some things buried in ice and time never truly die. They wait. And they watch. She only knew that the wind outside had shifted, and for just a moment, the cabin had felt less like a tomb and more like a beginning. They didn't venture far into the cabin that first evening. Amanda was too aware of structural damage, too conscious of Lily's growing fear, too exhausted from the drive and the adrenaline of the auction. Instead, they made a camp of sorts in the front room, the only space that didn't feel like it might collapse. Amanda had anticipated this. In the motel parking lot, before leaving Denver, she'd bought 2 sleeping bags, 3 blankets, and a battery-powered lantern with extra batteries. She'd packed canned beans, crackers, peanut butter, and a small camp stove that she'd used before, years ago, on a camping trip with her parents. She had no heat source except the camp stove, and using it indoors was dangerous, but she had no choice. The cabin's fireplace choked with soot and creosote, and the wood stove was too damaged to trust. As darkness fell completely, the temperature dropped. Amanda layered Lily's clothes, added another blanket, and sat beside her daughter in the sleeping bag, using her body heat as an additional buffer against the cold. "Tell me a story," Lily whispered, her breath visible in small clouds. Amanda thought of all the stories she'd told in the past 3 months, stories about how things would be okay, about how her father loved them even though he'd abandoned them, about how sometimes broken things could be fixed. She was tired of those stories. Instead, she looked at the carved initials on the wall, visible in the lantern light. "Once," Amanda began, "there was someone who lived in this cabin. Someone named J.M. And they carved their name into this wall," she pointed at the letters, "because they wanted to leave a mark. They wanted to say, I was here. I existed. I mattered." "Did they?" Lily asked. "Did they matter?" "Yes," Amanda said. "Because we're thinking about them now. Because their story didn't end when they left this place. It's still here, waiting for someone to find it." She didn't tell Lily about the blizzard of 1989, about the property being abandoned since then. She didn't say, "This place has been dead for 35 years. Instead, she held her daughter close and listened to the wind move through the valley outside. "We're going to add our story to this place," Amanda whispered. "Ours and JM's. We're going to make this cabin into something that matters again." Lily fell asleep eventually, her small body warm against Amanda's chest. Amanda stayed awake for hours, staring at the carved letters and wondering what had happened to JM in 1989. She wondered if they'd survived the blizzard. She wondered if they'd ever felt as desperate and terrified as Amanda felt now. Somewhere in the darkness, a board creaked, old wood settling, or the wind testing the walls, or something else entirely. Amanda didn't move. She kept her eyes on the letters in the lantern light. "Don't let it take you," the carving said. Amanda held her daughter tighter and whispered back into the darkness, "I won't. I promise." But even as she said it, she wasn't sure which threat she was warning against: the cold, the isolation, the life she'd left behind, or something else. Something that lived in this cabin and had been waiting for 35 years for someone to find it. Outside, the wind rose higher, carrying the scent of snow and old secrets down from the ridge. Morning came gray and reluctant through the boarded windows. Amanda woke stiff and cold, Lily still curled against her chest, breathing shallow and even in sleep. The lantern had died at some point during the night, its battery depleted. In the thin daylight that filtered through gaps in the boards, the cabin looked even worse than it had the night before, less like a fixer-upper and more like a tomb someone had forgotten to seal. Amanda carefully extracted herself from the sleeping bag, moving slow to avoid disturbing Lily. Her breath clouded in front of her face. The temperature inside the cabin couldn't have been more than 35 degrees. Outside, fresh snow had fallen, at least 6 inches, maybe more. The storm had come while they slept. She pulled back a corner of one of the boarded windows, carefully, not wanting to disturb anything that might be structural. The forest beyond was absolutely silent. Snow hung heavy on the evergreen branches, and the sky was the color of old concrete. There was no wind this morning, which somehow made the silence feel even heavier, more oppressive. As if the forest itself was holding its breath. Amanda had spent years in emergency rooms, places of controlled chaos where critical decisions had to be made in seconds. She understood crisis. But this was different. This was the absence of crisis. This was the feeling of being completely, utterly alone. She turned back to find Lily awake, watching her with those two old eyes. "How cold is it?" Lily asked. "Cold enough," Amanda said, which wasn't an answer, but it was honest. "We need to get some heat going. That's the first priority." She'd researched in the 3 weeks between winning the cabin and today. She'd read old forum posts from homesteaders about starting wood fires, about survival in remote cabins. She understood the theory. The practice was something else entirely. The cabin had a fireplace, a large stone structure on the eastern wall that looked like it hadn't been used in decades. Above it, the chimney was partially collapsed, and the opening was choked with debris, bird nests, fallen mortar, what looked like animal bones. The cast iron grate was thick with rust and ash. Amanda gathered what she could find outside: branches, bark, fallen wood that was mostly dry. She brought it inside, building a careful stack near the hearth. Then she faced the fireplace. The first match wouldn't light. Neither would the second. On the third try, she managed to coax a small flame from a piece of birch bark, and she carefully fed it with the smallest twigs, gentler than she'd ever been with anything in her life. The flame caught. She added slightly larger branches. "It's working," Lily whispered from her position, still wrapped in the sleeping bag. "Look, Ma. It's working." But it wasn't. The moment Amanda added a piece of larger wood, smoke began to pour back into the room instead of up the chimney. Not a little smoke. Billowing clouds of it, thick and acrid, filling the small space within seconds. Amanda's eyes watered. She coughed, harsh and painful, and Lily scrambled out of the sleeping bag, also coughing. Outside, Amanda managed to shout, and she grabbed Lily's hand, pulling her toward the door. They stumbled out into the snow, both of them gasping, their lungs burning. The cold air felt like a slap, but it was clean. It didn't burn. Amanda knelt in the snow, coughing until her ribs ached, while Lily stood beside her, one small hand on her mother's back. "The chimney," Amanda wheezed, understanding immediately. "It's blocked." They stood in the snow until Amanda's coughing subsided and her eyes stopped streaming. She wiped her face with the back of her hand, aware of Lily watching her with an expression that was part fear, part something else. Calculation, maybe? Or resignation. The expression of a child who'd learned not to expect her needs to be met. "We'll figure it out," Amanda said, hearing the desperation in her own voice. "We just need to clear the chimney. One step at a time, remember?" Lily didn't respond. She looked back at the cabin, at the smoke still drifting from the door, and then at her mother. "We'll freeze here, Mom," she said quietly. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact. A child's assessment of their situation, stated with the matter-of-factness of someone who'd learned that disappointment and failure were just part of how the world worked. Amanda's chest tightened. She wanted to argue. Wanted to promise that everything would be fine, that they'd find a way, that their $10 cabin would become a home. But she was standing in the snow in an old coat that didn't fit properly, with her 8-year-old daughter, at a property that had been abandoned since before Lily was born. Instead, she took her daughter's hand. "Then we'll stay warm while we do," she said. "Come on. Let's explore." Once the smoke had cleared and they'd cracked the windows as wide as the boarded frames would allow, Amanda and Lily ventured deeper into the cabin. The front room remained their domain, but beyond it lay 2 other small spaces, a bedroom and a storage area, both packed with the residue of abandonment. The bedroom was empty except for a rusted bed frame and a thick coating of dust. A faded calendar hung on one wall, stopped at March 1990. Amanda didn't look at it too closely. She didn't want to know exactly when the last person had been here, or what had happened to them. The storage room was more interesting. It was packed with crates and boxes, tools hanging from nails, old furniture stacked haphazardly. And there, under a pile of burlap sacks and old rope, Amanda found a wooden crate marked in faded ink, Mayfield. She brushed away the dust. Inside were old tools, a hammer with a worn handle, nails, screwdrivers, a level. Items someone had left behind, not because they were worthless, but perhaps because they'd expected to come back for them. Letters were stacked in a small wooden box, tied with twine that disintegrated when Amanda touched it. She didn't read them. Not yet. She just held the stack for a moment, aware of their weight, their fragility. "What's that?" Lily asked, pointing to a small metal box tucked in the corner, partially buried under a fallen shelf. Amanda retrieved it. The box was tarnished silver, no larger than a book, sealed with wax that had hardened to the consistency of stone. There were no markings on it, no indication of what it might contain. "I don't know," Amanda said. "Maybe something someone wanted to keep safe." She started to pry at the wax seal, then stopped. Something about the box felt wrong. Not dangerous, exactly, but protected. Guarded. As if opening it would breach something sacred, or dangerous, or both. She placed it carefully back where she'd found it, covering it again with the fallen shelf. "We'll leave that alone," she told Lily. "For now." As darkness fell again, they built their camp in the front room once more. Amanda had managed to clear part of the chimney by standing on a precarious ladder and pulling out debris by hand, nests, branches, years of buildup. It wasn't completely clear. There was still something higher up, something she couldn't reach. But it was better. She lit the fireplace again, this time more carefully. The smoke still came back, but not the billowing clouds of before. The room filled with a thin haze that stung their eyes and throat, but it was bearable. And warmth came with it, genuine warmth, spreading through the front room in a way that the camp stove never had. Lily sat close to the fire, cross-legged, watching the flames with the intensity of someone who'd learned to find warmth where others saw only cold. Amanda stood at the window, looking out at the snow and the dark forest beyond. Somewhere out there, in the silence and the snow, was the valley and the road and the bus stop. Civilization. All of it 12 miles away. She thought about the last letter in the Mayfield crate, the one she'd glimpsed before setting them aside. The handwriting had been rushed, emotional, and it had ended mid-sentence, as if interrupted. She thought about the carved letters on the hearth. J.M., 1989. Don't let it take you. And she thought about the wax-sealed box, hidden in the storage room, waiting. "Mom." Lily's voice pulled her from her thoughts. "Are you okay?" Amanda turned back to her daughter, silhouetted against the firelight, and forced a smile. The fire died sometime after midnight. Amanda woke to silence and cold, the kind of cold that penetrated bone deep, that made her own body feel like a foreign object, stiff and painful. The lantern had died again. There was no heat source, no light except the faintest glow filtering through the cracks in the boarded windows. Beside her, Lily was curled into a tight ball, barely visible under the pile of blankets. Amanda could see her breath, small and shallow and regular. Still asleep. Still believing that morning would bring solutions. Amanda wanted to cry. Wanted to rage at the injustice of it, that they'd managed to coax a fire to life, that it had burned through the evening and into the night, that they'd had actual warmth and then had lost it. That the one thing keeping them alive had simply given up. She checked the fireplace. The wood had burned down to ash. No embers. Nothing to rebuild from. And it was still dark outside, hours until dawn, hours until the cold lifted even a fraction. Amanda wrapped herself in another blanket and sat huddled near the dead fireplace, waiting. She thought about the motel room in Denver. The efficiency of electric heat. The button you pressed and the warmth that came. She thought about giving up, about walking to the road, about knocking on doors until someone took pity on them. She thought about Lily's expression when the social worker had explained that it was temporary, that her father just needed some time, that they'd all be together again soon. She remembered her daughter's face the first night in the motel, the way she'd stared at the water-stained ceiling, processing the idea that her childhood was over. Amanda wasn't going backward. When the first gray light began to creep through the window cracks, Amanda forced herself to stand. Her joints ached. Her fingers were numb. But she moved, gathering the firewood she'd stacked the day before, preparing to try again. That's when she noticed it. A thin line of light, different from the general grayness, coming from behind one of the boarded window frames. Not sunrise, something else. Something external. She approached cautiously, peering at the gaps between the boards. Thick ice crystals had formed on the window itself, and where the early light caught them, it refracted into patterns. Delicate, intricate patterns that looked almost deliberate. Almost like calligraphy. Amanda stared at them for a long moment, then shook her head at her own foolishness. It was just ice. Just the way water froze in patterns. It didn't mean anything. But as she turned away, her foot caught on something near the fireplace. A loose floorboard, slightly raised. She would have ignored it, but as she stepped over it again, she heard something. A faint metallic scrape, like metal on stone, coming from somewhere beneath the floor. Later, she told herself, she rebuilt the fire more carefully this time, with smaller pieces of wood, arranged to maximize airflow. As the flames caught and grew, she heard it, a faint sound, like wind moving through a confined space, but that was impossible. The chimney was still partially blocked. Unless something had changed. Unless something had shifted in the night. The fire burned. It stayed burning. And slowly, painfully, the cold began to retreat. With daylight came routine. Amanda had spent years in emergency rooms where chaos was the default state, but a good nurse imposed order on that chaos. Structure. Systems. Protocols. Those habits had kept her sane through the divorce, through the selling of her possessions, through the motel months. Now they would keep her and Lily alive. She drew a map of the cabin in the first blank notebook she found in the Mayfield crate. She marked the fireplace, the windows, the weak spots in the structure. She noted the interior temperature with a small thermometer she'd packed. She documented the wood supply, how much they burned per day, how long it would last if they burned it at current rates. She rationed the canned beans. 1 can per day, divided into 2 meals. She melted snow for water in the camp stove, filtering it through cloth to remove particles. She sealed the largest drafts with rags and old newspapers, using nails to hold them in place. By the 3rd day, the cabin began to feel less like a place of random catastrophe and more like a puzzle with an attainable solution. Every problem had a cause. Every cause had a remedy. This was how Amanda had survived the nursing profession, by breaking crisis into manageable components. On the 4th day, she opened the notebook and began to write. Temperature inside, 42 degrees wood burned. Approximately 15 to 20 pounds water consumption. Approximately 2 gallons condition of Lily, stable. Cough developing. She wrote clinical observations in her nurse's shorthand, but underneath the medical entries, she found herself writing other things. Observations about the way light fell through the ice on the windows. The sound the wind made moving through the cabin's gaps. The feeling of the place, which was something she couldn't quite articulate but which seemed to shift from moment to moment. The house remembers, she wrote on the 5th day. I don't know what, but it remembers. On the 6th morning, while Lily was still asleep and the fire was burning steadily, Amanda retrieved the wax-sealed box from the storage room. Her fingers had warmed enough that she could work the seal, carefully, respectfully, as if she were opening a time capsule rather than a box. Inside were letters, dozens of them. They were addressed in careful handwriting to My Julia, and signed only E. The paper was yellowed, fragile. Amanda held the first one like it might disintegrate. My Julia, it began. I've been thinking about the storm the weather service predicted. If it comes like they're saying, we should be ready. I've checked the generator. The fuel tanks are full. We can survive up here if we need to. Amanda read through the letters methodically. They painted a picture of a couple preparing for a harsh winter. Of E. and Julia Mayfield, making plans, securing supplies, settling in for the season. The tone of the letters shifted as they progressed, from preparation to something deeper. Romance. Intimacy. The language of two people who loved each other and were choosing to face the world together. Then, near the bottom of the stack, the last letter. The handwriting was rushed now, almost frantic. The paper was creased, worn, as if it had been read many times, or written during severe distress. Julia, if the cold comes again, go down, not out. The passage will keep you warm. Don't try the road. Don't try to reach town. Go down, my love. Go down and wait for me. The passage will. The letter ended mid-sentence. The final words were barely legible, as if E's hand had been shaking as they wrote. Amanda set the letter down slowly. Her heart was beating faster. Go down. The passage. It could only mean one thing. She looked at the floorboards near the fireplace, the ones that had sounded hollow. The ones where she'd heard the metallic scrape. Mom! Lily's voice startled her. Amanda turned to find her daughter wrapped in blankets, watching her with concern. I'm okay, Amanda said automatically. Just looking at old letters. Lily padded over to the window where frost still covered the glass. Without speaking, she traced a heart shape on the frosted pane with her small finger. Then another. And another. A constellation of hearts, growing across the glass in a pattern that was somehow both childish and profoundly sad. We can make it pretty again, Lily whispered, not looking at her mother. All of it. We can make this whole place pretty. Amanda watched her daughter draw hearts into frost that would melt when the fire got warmer, that existed only in this moment of perfect cold. She thought about Julia Mayfield drawing something similar decades ago. She thought about going down instead of out. She thought about the hollow floorboards and the metallic sound and the passage that he had mentioned. Yes, Amanda said, pulling her daughter close. We can make it pretty. But even as she said it, she knew they were running out of time. The cold would only last so long. Soon enough, the mystery would demand answers. And beneath their feet, something waited in the darkness to be found. Amanda waited until Lily fell asleep that evening before she made her move. The fire was burning steadily, casting moving shadows across the walls of the cabin. She'd made Lily a warm meal, beans with some crackers, melted snow for drinking water, and told her a story about a girl who lived in a house made of gingerbread. Lily had fallen asleep mid-story, her small hand still wrapped around her mother's arm. Gently, Amanda extracted herself and retrieved the battery-powered lantern. It had recharged during the day, powered by the solar panel she'd jury-rigged above one of the high windows. The light came back to life with a soft hum, casting a single bright circle on the wooden floor. The hollow boards were easy to find now that she knew where to look. Near the fireplace, slightly to the left, where the stone hearth met the wooden floor. She knelt beside them, running her fingers along the edges. The wood was warped, swollen with age and moisture, but when she worked a knife blade under the edge, the first board came up more easily than she expected. Dust rose in clouds, thick and choking. Amanda coughed softly, aware of Lily sleeping just yards away. She cleared away the debris with her bare hands, careful not to make unnecessary noise. More boards came up. 3, 4. Beneath them, darkness. Cold, stone-scented darkness. And the sound of something metal. A ring or handle set into what looked like a trapdoor made of reinforced wood and metal bands. Amanda's hands were shaking as she grasped the handle. It was heavier than she expected, and the hinges screamed in protest as she pulled it open. The sound seemed impossibly loud in the small cabin, and Amanda froze, listening. Lily didn't move. The fire crackled on, indifferent. Slowly, Amanda turned her lantern toward the opening. A staircase descended into stone darkness. Narrow. Steep. The walls on either side were rough stone, not brick, natural stone, as if carved directly from the mountain itself. Moisture beaded on the surface, reflecting her lamplight like tiny diamonds. The air rising from below was different from the air in the cabin. Warmer. Much warmer. Amanda sat at the edge of the opening for a long moment, her rational mind providing a list of reasons not to descend. The stairs could be structurally unsound. She could become trapped. She could leave Lily alone. She climbed down. The stairs switchbacked 3 times before opening into a larger space. Amanda emerged into a chamber carved entirely from stone. The walls glowed faintly in her lamplight, streaked with minerals that caught and reflected her light. The air was genuinely warm here, not just warmer than the cabin, but actually warm. Body temperature, maybe. Like stepping into a living thing. Her lantern beam swept across the chamber and caught on metal. Shelves lined one wall, metal shelves reinforced with heavy brackets, laden with jars. Hundreds of them. All sealed with wax. Amanda moved closer, understanding immediately what she was seeing. Preserved food. Beans, vegetables, fruits. Someone had spent years preparing for survival, storing supplies in a place where the stable temperature would keep them fresh indefinitely. At the far end of the chamber stood a boiler, ancient, but maintained. Next to it, a generator. Large, professional grade, the kind you'd find in a serious bunker or shelter. The cables ran up into the darkness above, disappearing into the stone ceiling. A note was taped to the generator, the paper brittle with age but the handwriting still legible. For whoever survives the storm, keep the flame alive. Amanda read it 3 times, her throat tight. Keep the flame alive. The same phrase carved into the hearth above. The same instruction, repeated, as if it was the most important thing in the world. She moved deeper into the chamber, her lantern casting huge shadows across the stone. There was more back here, a workbench laden with tools, cans of oil, spare parts for the generator. A shelf of books, their spines faded but the titles still readable, survival guides, engineering manuals, medical texts. And photographs. Dozens of them, black and white, mounted on the stone wall with careful precision. Amanda recognized the cabin in the photographs, younger, intact, the porch not yet sagging, the chimney still standing proud. And in the photographs, people. A man and a woman. Both dark-haired. Both smiling. The woman had Lily's eyes. Julia Mayfield. It had to be. Amanda's breath came shallow. She was standing in someone's tomb. A carefully prepared, well-maintained tomb. A shelter built by a man who had loved his wife and had known, with absolute certainty, that winter was coming. The generator hummed beneath her fingers when she touched it. Barely audible but definitely running. A faint electrical buzz that had been cycling for, she did the math, 35 years. At least, it should have failed decades ago. Should have stopped running years into the process. But it was still working. The air shifted around her. For just a moment, it seemed to move like something living, cool air brushing against her face, moving through the chamber with a sense of purpose. Amanda's lantern flickered once. Twice. The light steadied. She climbed the stairs faster than was safe, her heart hammering in her chest. At the top, she paused, listening. Lily was still asleep. The fire still burned. The normal world was still there, waiting for her to rejoin it. But as Amanda reached up to close the trapdoor, the lantern flickered again. In that moment of darkness, she heard it. A sound like wind moving through a confined space. Not threatening. Not frightening exactly. But unmistakable. A voice. A whisper, though no one was speaking. Don't let it take you. The words came from everywhere and nowhere. From the stone. From the air. From somewhere inside Amanda herself. She pulled the trapdoor shut with shaking hands and replaced the floorboards, moving as quickly and quietly as she could. Her mind was reeling, trying to categorize what she'd seen, what she'd heard. The generator should not be running. The air should not be warm. The voice should not exist. But all of it had been real. All of it was real. Amanda sat by the fire, waiting for her heartbeat to slow, waiting for her hands to stop shaking. She looked at Lily, sleeping peacefully, unaware of the secrets buried beneath her feet. Unaware of the message left for survivors. Unaware of the weight of the dead. She could tell her. Could show her. Could include her in the discovery. But instead, Amanda pulled her daughter close and decided to keep the passage a secret. At least for now. At least until she understood what it meant. What the generator was doing down there. Why the air was warm. Why the voice, if it had been a voice, seemed to know her name. She wrote in her journal when dawn came. Day 7. Found something beneath the floorboards. Don't know what to do with this knowledge. The passage keeps its secrets. The passage keeps the flame alive. We are not alone in this cabin. We never have been. The storm came without warning. Amanda had been monitoring the weather obsessively, checking the battery-powered radio, reading the forecasts scratched into the weather-worn clipboard she'd found in the storage room. The forecast called for light snow, possibly some wind. Nothing catastrophic. Nothing that would trap them. But weather in the mountains didn't follow forecasts. She woke to the sound of wind that sounded like something alive, something with intentions and rage. The cabin groaned around them, the walls seeming to flex with each gust. Through the cracks in the boarded windows, Amanda could see sheets of rain mixed with sleet, moving almost horizontally across the valley. Freezing rain. The worst kind of storm. Mom! Lily's small voice came from beneath the blankets. What's happening? Storm, Amanda said, trying to sound calm. A big one. We're going to be okay. She wasn't sure that was true. Freezing rain was different from snow. It coated everything, trees, power lines, roads, with a layer of ice that weighed tons. It bent trees until they snapped. It brought down power lines. It made roads into skating rinks. And they were exposed. Amanda did the math in her head. The cabin's fireplace was still problematic. Even with her repairs, smoke backed up frequently. They had maybe 2 more days of wood if she burned it continuously. After that, nothing between them and the cold except layers of blankets. She thought about the cellar. About the warmth. About the generator that had been running for 35 years. She thought about keeping Lily safe. By midday, the decision made itself. The roof had begun to leak in the back room, water dripping steadily through a gap that had widened as the wind pushed and pulled at the structure. The temperature inside the cabin had dropped to 38 degrees despite the fire burning almost constantly. Lily was starting to cough more seriously, her small body shaking with the effort. Amanda packed quickly. Blankets. The camp stove. Canned food. Water. The battery-powered lantern. She wrapped Lily in every piece of clothing she owned and explained, in the gentlest voice she could manage, that they were going to explore the special place beneath the cabin. The passage? Lily asked, her eyes wide. You found it? Amanda's stomach dropped. How did you? I heard you, Lily said simply. That night. You were being quiet, but I heard the boards moving. And I heard the wind sound like voices. Amanda wanted to cry. Wanted to rage at the injustice of having thought she was protecting her daughter from knowledge that Lily had possessed all along. But instead she took her daughter's small hand. Yes, she said. The passage. There's something warm down there. Something that can help us. The descent was slower with Lily in tow, the child's small legs struggling with the steep steps. But they made it. The moment they emerged into the stone chamber, Lily's entire demeanor changed. It's warm, she whispered, wonder in her voice. It's actually warm. Yes, Amanda said. And I think I know how to make it even warmer. She'd spent days studying the generator in her mind, going over the mechanics, understanding the fuel systems. It had been maintained, oil-checked, filters clean, everything in working order as if someone had been caring for it regularly. Impossibly regularly. Amanda found the fuel tank. It was full. It should not be full after 35 years, but it was. The diesel was clear, preserved by the stable underground temperature and something else. Maybe some kind of additive, maybe something she couldn't explain. She studied the ignition system, found the manual starter, took a breath, and turned the key. The generator coughed once, twice, then roared to life. The sound was deafening in the stone chamber, echoing off the walls like something alive and angry. But underneath the noise was something else, electricity. Actual, real electricity, flowing through systems that had been dormant for decades. Lights flickered on. Amber bulbs mounted in the stone ceiling, connected by wiring that ran deep into the rock. One by one, they illuminated, casting the chamber in a warm, golden glow. Lily made a small sound, something between a gasp and a laugh. "Magic," she whispered. "You made magic happen." The heat came next. Vents in the stone wall that Amanda hadn't noticed before began to hum. Warm air poured from them, spreading through the chamber like an invisible tide. Real heat. Sustained, even, beautiful heat. For the first time since arriving at Coldwater Ridge, Amanda felt her shoulders drop. Felt her chest loosen. Felt the burden of survival lighten just slightly. "We're safe," she told Lily, pulling her daughter close. "We're actually safe now." They sat together in the warming chamber while the storm raged above. Amanda set up their camp in the corner farthest from the generator, spreading blankets on the relatively dry stone floor. She opened cans of beans, made tea with melted snow heated on the camp stove. Lily ate and dozed, her cough seeming to ease in the warm, humid air. But as evening came and the generator settled into a steady hum, something changed. Amanda was sitting with her back against the stone wall when she heard it, a metallic click, sharp and distinct, echoing from deeper in the chamber. Not the generator. Something else. Something that had responded to the generator coming to life. It sounded like a lock. Like a door. Like something opening. Amanda sat very still, listening. But there were no more sounds. Just the steady hum of the generator, the whisper of warm air through the vents, and underneath it all, a faint mechanical whine, like something running at a distance, behind closed doors. Lily slept peacefully, curled on the blankets. Amanda watched her daughter in the amber light of the chamber and realized, with crystalline clarity, that everything had changed. That the cabin had been waiting. That the passage had a purpose. That the generator hadn't been maintained by human hands in 3.5 decades. And somewhere deeper in the stone, something else was waiting to be discovered. She stood, lantern in hand, and began to walk deeper into the chamber. The walls curved away from her, following the natural geology of the mountain. The air grew warmer as she moved. And ahead, barely visible in her lamplight, was an opening. Another passage, narrower than the first, leading deeper still. Amanda thought about turning back. Thought about protecting the fragile piece they'd found. Thought about leaving mysteries buried. But she stepped forward into the passage anyway, drawn by something she couldn't name. Curiosity. Fear. The need to understand. The passage opened into another chamber. And in that chamber, in the pale light of her lantern, Amanda saw something that changed everything. She stood frozen, unable to process what her eyes were telling her. Behind her, the generator hummed its eternal song. Below her, Lily slept in the warm amber light. And around her, the answers to questions she hadn't even known to ask. The second chamber was smaller than the first, carved deep into the mountain's heart. The air here was colder despite the warmth radiating from above. The temperature dropped gradually as Amanda moved deeper, as if the mountain itself was creating layers of protection. Or containment. A workbench dominated one wall, laden with tools and equipment. But it was the wall to her left that caught Amanda's attention. It was covered in photographs, just like the first chamber, but these were different. More intimate. Personal. Ethan Mayfield at 20, dark-haired and smiling, standing in front of a cabin that looked almost new. Julia beside him, her arm through his, her eyes reflecting the camera's flash. The two of them in winter gear, snow piled behind them. Julia alone, holding a newborn. The child, a daughter, Amanda realized, growing through the years in sequential photographs that told a visual story of a life lived and lost. And below the photographs, a journal. Large, bound in leather, resting on the workbench like a relic in a museum. Amanda's hands shook as she picked it up. The leather was soft, preserved by the stable temperature and careful maintenance. The pages inside were handwritten, the ink faded but legible. She recognized the handwriting from the letters upstairs. Ethan's handwriting. She opened to the first entry. November 15, 1989. The weather report calls for a historic storm. Julia thinks I'm being paranoid, but I've installed the generator, stocked the cellar with 6 months of supplies, and checked the fuel tanks 3 times. If this storm is as bad as they're predicting, we'll be ready. Julia and I have always been prepared. It's kept us alive this long. Amanda flipped forward. The entries became more frantic as the storm approached. November 23, 1989. The blizzard hit this morning. Wind speeds of 80 miles per hour, temperatures dropping to 20 below. The roads are impassable. We're safe here. The cabin is holding. The generator is running perfectly. I've never been more grateful for the work I did on this place. Then days later. November 29, 1989. Day 7 of the storm. It shows no signs of stopping. Julia is frightened, though she tries to hide it. I can see it in her eyes. But we have heat. We have food. We have each other. We will survive this. Amanda sat on the cold stone floor and kept reading. The entries told the story of 2 people sheltering from a catastrophe, measuring out survival in rations and hours. But as the days turned into weeks, the tone shifted. December 10, 1989. The fuel level in the generator is dropping faster than I calculated. I must have miscalculated the consumption rate. Or the storm has burned more energy than I accounted for. Either way, I can no longer deny the mathematics. At the current rate, we have 2 weeks of fuel remaining. After that, we will have no heat, no light, no way to maintain the systems that keep us alive. Julia doesn't know yet. I haven't told her. I'm still trying to find a solution. Amanda felt her throat tighten. She knew this story. She was living this story. December 15, 1989. The fuel will run out on December 28th. The storm has begun to break, but the roads remain impassable. The snow is too deep. The temperature too low. Walking out would be suicide. But staying means freezing. I have made a decision. On the 27th, when the generator shuts down, I will attempt to reach town. It's 12 miles by the old logging road. If I leave early in the morning, if I walk quickly, I might make it. I might bring back help before the cold becomes lethal. Julia doesn't know. I can't tell her. It would terrify her. But I have to try. Amanda's eyes blurred with tears. She knew how this ended. She could feel it in the weight of the journal, in the silence of the chamber, in the way Ethan's handwriting seemed to be reaching across 35 years to tell her his story. She turned to the final entry. The handwriting was shaky, rushed, written in different ink, as if someone else had picked up the pen. December 27, 1989. He left this morning. He said he was going to try to reach town for help. He said he would be back before nightfall. He said the storm had broken enough. He said many things. I believed him because I had to. Because the alternative was to accept that we were going to freeze here, that our daughter would never know the world beyond this cabin, that all of E's preparation, all of his love and care, would only delay our suffering, not prevent it. But I don't believe he will come back. I know him. I know the mathematics of walking 12 miles in a blizzard. I know the temperature. I know the human body's limits. And I know that my husband is not coming home. The generator will die tomorrow. When it does, the heat will fade. I have made a bed in the stone chamber, where the cold will come more slowly. Our daughter is asleep. She doesn't understand what's happening. She thinks this is an adventure. She thinks her father will return and everything will be normal again. She is 3 years old. She will not survive the cold. I have prepared a place for her. I will keep her warm as long as I can. And when I can no longer do that, I will do what I must to ensure she doesn't suffer. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. We came here seeking sanctuary. We found only a tomb. If anyone reads this, forgive us. We were not strong enough. We were not prepared enough. And love, it turns out, is not enough to survive the winter. Maybe you can save someone else. Julia Mayfield, December 27, 1989. Amanda sat frozen, the journal in her trembling hands. She read Julia's final entry again, and then again, trying to understand what the words meant. Trying to accept what had happened in this chamber 35 years ago. The Mayfields had not survived. That much was clear. But there was no body here. No remains. Just photographs and memories and a journal left behind as testimony. Amanda thought of Lily upstairs, sleeping in the warm chamber. Lily, who had her mother's determination and her father's capacity for love, even after he'd abandoned them. Lily, who drew hearts on frosted windows and whispered that they could make it pretty again. She thought of the parallelism. Single parent. To desperation and cold and the fear of freezing in the dark. All of it echoing across the decades, past meeting present, Julia meeting Amanda, across the years and the stone and the snow. But there was one difference. Amanda had the generator. Amanda had found the passage. Amanda had fuel and food and light and heat. And Amanda had something Julia hadn't. She had come into this place knowing its history, armed with the knowledge of what could happen if she gave up. She closed the journal carefully and stood, her legs unsteady beneath her. She walked back through the passage, back to the main chamber where Lily slept. She sat beside her daughter and held her close, watching the rise and fall of her small chest. "We're not dying here," Amanda whispered. "Not like they did. I promise you that, Lily. I promise." Above them, the generator hummed its eternal song. And deeper in the mountain, in the stone chamber, Julia's journal waited, no longer a record of a tragedy, but a warning, a testament. And perhaps, Amanda realized something else. A key. Amanda made a decision in that moment. She would finish the Mayfield story. She would survive this winter. She and Lily would leave this place when spring came, and they would carry Julia and Ethan's memory with them. They would tell people what had happened. They would ensure that the cabin was remembered not as a tomb, but as a place of love and desperate preparation. They would live. And in living, they would honor the dead. The generator's hum changed on the 15th day. Amanda noticed it first thing in the morning. A subtle shift in the pitch, from a steady thrum to something fractionally more hesitant. She went to the fuel tank and checked the gauge. The needle had dropped significantly. At the current consumption rate, they had maybe 3 more days. "How long until it dies?" Lily asked, appearing beside her mother like a ghost. Her daughter had become quieter over the past 2 weeks, more observant, less childlike. The stone chamber had changed her, or perhaps revealed something that had always been there. A capacity for understanding that transcended her 8 years. "Long enough," Amanda said, but she was already calculating. Long enough to do what? They moved through the days with obsessive routine. Amanda rationed the canned food to 1 meal per day. Half a can of beans, a few crackers, melted snow for water. She kept the generator running constantly, unable to bear the thought of losing the heat, but knowing that every hour it ran was an hour closer to silence. On the 17th day, something changed. Amanda was sitting alone in the main chamber while Lily slept in the back, and she heard it, a whisper moving through the ventilation system. Not the wind. Not mechanical noise. Something else. A voice, almost. Or the memory of a voice. She stood and moved to the nearest vent, pressing her ear against the stone. The whisper came again. Indistinct but unmistakable. A woman's voice, forming words Amanda couldn't quite make out but somehow understood anyway. Not in language, but in feeling. In intent. Endure. Don't let it take you. Amanda stepped back, her heart hammering. She looked around the empty chamber. No one was there. But as she watched, she noticed something she hadn't before, a faint shimmer of warmth in one of the corners, a place where no vent led, where no heat source reached. The air there seemed to glow, almost imperceptibly, and the temperature was noticeably warmer than the surrounding stone. A warning, perhaps. Or a gift. Amanda didn't tell Lily. But over the next 2 days, whenever her daughter seemed particularly cold or frightened, Amanda guided her to that corner. And each time, the warmth seemed to intensify. Each time, Lily's shivering would ease. On the 19th day, the generator began to sputter. Amanda sat by it, listening to the irregular rhythm. It wasn't failing gradually, it was failing now. The fuel consumption had increased, or perhaps the generator was struggling against its own age, unable to maintain the pressure needed to run at full capacity. She had maybe 6 hours. Maybe less. She made a decision. "Get dressed," she told Lily. "Every piece of clothing you have. We're going to do something dangerous, and I need you to be as warm as possible." Lily didn't ask questions. She layered sweaters, wrapped scarves around her small frame, pulled on the heavy coat that hung past her knees. Amanda did the same, then retrieved something from the storage area of the second chamber, a bright red scarf, old but intact, that had belonged to Julia Mayfield. She'd found it wrapped around a shelf, carefully preserved, and she'd known immediately what she would use it for. They climbed the stone staircase. The cabin above was cold. The fire had died hours ago, unable to compete with the indoor heat from below, and Amanda had stopped bothering to maintain it. But as they emerged into the main room, Amanda felt the familiar touch of warmth on her face. Not from fire. Not from the chamber below. A presence. Gentle. Guiding. "Go," something seemed to whisper. "Go and live." Amanda pulled Lily close and climbed out of the cabin through a gap in one of the boarded windows. The outside world hit them like a physical blow. The temperature was below zero. The wind was still brutal, though it had shifted, now blowing from the west instead of the north. The snow had stopped falling, but the ground was buried under 6 feet of accumulated powder and ice. She tied the red scarf to what remained of the chimney, securing it tightly so the wind couldn't tear it free. The fabric whipped in the gale, brilliant red against the white and gray and black of the storm. Then she and Lily descended the ridge. Amanda had no plan. No map. She only knew that the road was down, that the valley was down, that rescue was down. She half-carried, half-dragged Lily through the snow, her legs burning with effort, her lungs screaming with each breath of sub-zero air. They made it maybe a quarter mile before Amanda's foot caught on something hidden beneath the snow. She fell hard, landing on her side, the impact driving the breath from her lungs. She tried to stand. Her legs wouldn't respond. Lily was crying, her small voice lost in the wind. Amanda pulled her daughter close, wrapping her body around Lily's smaller frame, trying to provide whatever heat she could. But her own heat was fading. Her vision was dimming at the edges. This is how it ends, she thought. Like Julia. Like Ethan. The cold takes everyone eventually. But then, lights. Far below, at the edge of her dimming vision, Amanda saw faint lights moving through the valley. Multiple lights. Moving upward. Searching. She tried to shout, but her voice came out as a croak. She tried to stand, to wave her arms, but her body wasn't responding to commands anymore. "Come on," a voice whispered. Not in her ears, but in her mind. Julia's voice, she was certain. "But don't give in." Amanda summoned the last of her strength and forced herself upright. She grabbed Lily and half-carried her daughter down the slope, moving toward the lights. Each step was agony. Her vision kept threatening to go black. But she kept moving, driven by something beyond reason, beyond will. The lights grew brighter, closer. She heard voices. Human voices. Shouting. The crunch of footsteps in snow. "There," someone yelled. "I see them." Arms grabbed her. Warm arms. Human arms. People in heavy winter gear, their faces concerned and real and solid. A woman in a rescue uniform was taking Lily, wrapping her in a thermal blanket. A man was lowering Amanda onto a stretcher. "The cabin," Amanda managed to say. "Red scarf. Chimney." "We know," the man said. "That's what drew us up here. Saw the smoke this morning, looked like a signal fire. Had to investigate." The smoke. Amanda looked back at the cabin, invisible in the distance through the blowing snow. There was no fire. She hadn't lit one. But there was smoke rising from the chimney, visible and deliberate and impossible. "Thank you," Amanda whispered to the presence she could no longer feel but somehow still sensed. "Thank you, Julia." As they carried her down the mountain, supported by strong hands and rescue equipment, Amanda closed her eyes and felt something release inside her. A burden lifted. A story completed. Not the Mayfield story. That would remain unfinished, tragic, preserved in stone and memory and a journal waiting to be found. But hers and Lily's, that story was going to live. The hospital in the valley town was nothing like the emergency rooms where Amanda had once worked. It was small, understaffed, decorated with cheerful murals that seemed designed for children who'd never seen real fear. But the beds were warm, the doctors competent, and the staff treated Amanda and Lily with a combination of relief and bewilderment that suggested rescue operations didn't often end this successfully. They kept them for 3 days. Observation, the doctors said. Monitoring for frostbite, exposure damage, infection. But Amanda knew the real reason. They were waiting for Amanda to break. Waiting for her to admit that she'd been reckless, dangerous, irresponsible. Waiting for her to confess that leaving her daughter in a half-collapsed cabin with a failing fireplace had been the action of a desperate, unfit mother. She didn't give them that confession. On the second day, a sheriff arrived. A woman in her 50s, weathered by mountain winters and county politics, with kind eyes that didn't miss anything. She sat beside Amanda's hospital bed and asked questions methodically. "Your daughter says you saved her," the sheriff said, not as an accusation but as an observation. "My daughter is 8 years old and has learned not to make excuses for adults," Amanda replied carefully. "The rescue team said when they found you, you were nearly gone. Another hour and you both would have been dead." "Yes. But you weren't thinking about yourself when you climbed out in that storm. You were trying to signal for help." Amanda didn't answer immediately. She thought about the red scarf. About Julia's whisper. About the impossible smoke rising from the chimney. About the moment when the lights appeared in the valley below. "I was thinking about finishing a story," Amanda said finally. "There's a journal in the cabin. In the cellar. You need to read it. You need to know what happened there." The sheriff's expression shifted. Interest. Recognition. She'd been waiting for this conversation. "The Mayfields," she said quietly. "You found them." "What's left of their story," Amanda confirmed. "They didn't make it out. But they left behind everything that matters. Preparation. A warning. And now, if we're careful, a legacy." When Amanda and Lily were discharged 4 days later, no one expected them to return to Coldwater Ridge. The county offered them assistance, a shelter in town, food stamps, the standard social services package for displaced families. David's parents, surprisingly, offered to help. Even Lily's grandmother, Amanda's estranged mother, called with an offer of plain fare and a spare room. Everyone expected Amanda to say yes to one of these offers. Instead, she rented a truck. The drive back to the cabin took 6 hours. The roads had been cleared, treated with salt, made passable. Spring was coming. Amanda could feel it in the slightly warmer air, the way the snow was beginning to settle and compress, the faint scent of pine and water moving beneath the frozen landscape. When they pulled into the clearing, Amanda felt Lily stiffen beside her. "Are we staying?" Lily asked quietly. Amanda looked at the cabin, half sunken under snow, boarded windows like closed eyes, the chimney that had carried Julia's final message. She thought about the stone chambers beneath it, the journal, the photographs, the impossible warmth in the corner where Julia's presence lingered. She thought about running. Thought about rebuilding a normal life in a normal town with normal schools and normal families. Then she thought about Julia's final entry. "Maybe you can save someone else." "Yes," Amanda said. "We're staying. We're going to rebuild this place. And we're going to make sure nobody forgets what happened here." Lily was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached over and took her mother's hand. "Good," she said. "I didn't want to leave." The first thing Amanda did was secure the cellar. She hired contractors from town, carefully vetted, trustworthy men who asked few questions when she explained that the cabin had historical significance. They reinforced the stone ceiling, checked the structural integrity, sealed the dangerous spots. They didn't explore the second chamber. Amanda had explained that it was sealed off, too unstable for access, and they accepted her word. The journal, photographs, and letters were documented and photographed before being stored in a temperature-controlled safe. Amanda had copies made and filed them with the County Historical Society. She wrote up Ethan and Julia's story, the key facts of their life and death, and submitted it as an official historical record. She registered the property as a heritage site. But the real work was making the cabin livable. The boarded windows came down first, letting light flood into spaces that hadn't seen sunlight in decades. New windows were installed, practical, modern, but designed to match the original aesthetic. The sagging roof was reinforced and reshingled. The porch was rebuilt, new steps installed, the wood treated to withstand another 3 decades of mountain weather. Inside, Amanda worked with her own hands when contractors weren't available. She scraped and painted. She sealed cracks in the walls. She installed a proper wood stove, modern, efficient, safe, in the main room. The chimney was fully cleared and professionally inspected. Lily helped where she could. She painted walls with Amanda, her small hands spreading blue and cream and pale green across the wooden surfaces. She helped scrub away decades of grime. She planted wildflower seeds in the cleared garden space, marking each row with careful labels in her best handwriting. The generator in the cellar was left untouched. Amanda had the electrical system updated to work with it, creating a backup power source that could be activated in emergencies. But mostly, it remained silent, a ghost of the past, waiting in the dark. Sometimes Amanda went down to check on it. She would stand in the main chamber and look at the photographs of the Mayfields. She would touch the journal gently, respectfully. And occasionally she would feel that faint warmth in the corner, present but no longer urgent. Peaceful host. Thank you, Amanda would whisper. We're keeping the flame alive. We're keeping the story alive. By May, the cabin had transformed. Fresh paint, new windows, a functioning kitchen and bathroom, proper heating and power. Lily's bedroom was painted pale yellow, with wildflower paintings on the walls done by her own hand. Amanda's room was simple but warm. The front room, where they'd first sheltered, was now a comfortable living space where a fire crackled in the new wood stove every evening. On the first night they spent in the fully restored cabin, Amanda and Lily sat together in front of the fire. Outside, the snow had almost completely melted. The forest was alive with the sounds of spring, birds returning, water running, new growth pushing through the thawing soil. Do you think she's still here? Lily asked, meaning Julia. Meaning the presence they both felt but had never fully discussed. Amanda thought about this carefully. About grief and love and the way some things refuse to end, even when life does. I think this place remembers her, Amanda said finally. I think what she and Ethan built here, the preparation, the care, the love, that doesn't disappear. It becomes part of the stone, part of the mountain, and it reaches out to people who need it. Like us, Lily said. Like us, Amanda agreed. They sat in silence, watching the flames dance in the wood stove. Outside, the first stars of evening were appearing, and somewhere in the stone beneath their feet, a generator hummed softly, not running now, just existing. Waiting. A monument to survival, to love, to the human capacity to prepare for catastrophe and to reach across the decades to help those who come after. The cabin had been saved. The Mayfield story would be remembered. And Amanda and Lily, a mother and daughter who had nearly frozen in the dark, had found a home. Not despite the tragedy that had soaked into these walls, but because of it. Because they had listened to what the mountain was trying to tell them. Because they had respected the past and chosen to build something new on its foundation. Fire and forgiveness. Heat and memory. The old and the new, burning together in the darkness, keeping the flame alive. The story broke in early June. A local newspaper reporter had gotten wind of the rescue, a woman and child found nearly dead in a remote cabin, saved by smoke that shouldn't have existed, a generator that had been running for 35 years in an underground chamber. The reporter did her research. She found the historical records Amanda had filed. She read excerpts from Ethan's journal. She interviewed the sheriff, the rescue team, the contractors who'd worked on the restoration. The headline ran across the front page of 3 regional newspapers: "Nurse defies winter, revives frozen cabin with perseverance and prayer." Within a week, donations began arriving. A local contractor offered to install solar panels at no cost. A hardware store donated supplies for ongoing maintenance. A local historical society arranged for the cabin to be officially registered as a heritage site and museum. The county, recognizing the story's emotional and historical significance, formally renamed the property the Mayfield Homestead and allocated funds for its preservation. But more than supplies and recognition came something else: people. Volunteers from town began arriving on weekends. They cleared the overgrown cemetery where old graves remained unmarked. They built a small memorial garden near the porch. They documented the cabin's history, photographed the interior, and created a display board that told the Mayfield story to visitors who would come seeking the truth of what had happened here. Amanda hadn't expected this. She'd wanted to preserve the cabin quietly, to honor the Mayfields without fanfare. But the more she resisted the attention, the more the community insisted on participating. She realized, eventually, that the story wasn't hers to gatekeep. It belonged to everyone now, to the town, to the county, to anyone who heard about a couple who had loved each other enough to prepare for catastrophe, and a woman and child who had survived by listening to voices from the past. The media attention eventually faded, replaced by quieter, more meaningful support. The cabin became a pilgrimage site for people interested in local history, architecture, and the strange stories that mountains held. Amanda and Lily gave tours to small groups, walking visitors through the restored rooms and down into the cellar chamber, explaining the generator and the fuel that should have run out decades ago but somehow sustained them through their darkest days. No one asked Amanda to explain the impossible. They seemed to accept, without needing scientific proof, that some things transcended rational understanding. That love, preparation, and stubborn determination could leave traces that persisted across decades. That the boundary between past and present was thinner in some places than others. On a clear afternoon in early July, exactly 8 months after Amanda and Lily had first arrived at Coldwater Ridge, they stood together on the porch of the restored cabin with a collection of wildflower seedlings and a smooth river stone. Amanda had found the stone weeks earlier, during one of her walks through the valley. It was perfect, pale gray with streaks of white, worn smooth by years of water and time. She'd had it engraved at a shop in town, the letters cut deep and clear. Julia Mayfield, 1989. "Do you want to do this?" Amanda asked Lily, though she already knew the answer. Lily nodded solemnly. She'd become serious this past year, more thoughtful, more aware of the weight of choices and consequences. But she'd also become resilient in a way that children shouldn't have to be. She carried the memory of nearly freezing to death with a kind of quiet understanding that suggested she'd learned something fundamental about survival and grace. Together, they worked to prepare the garden. Amanda had chosen wildflowers, columbine, lupin, Indian paintbrush, native to the mountain, hardy enough to survive the harsh climate. She planted them in a circle around the stone, her hands working the rich soil, her mother's instinct for nurturing expressed through the earth. Lily placed the engraved stone at the center of the circle, pressing it gently into the ground. "There," Lily said softly. "Now people will know she was here." Amanda knelt beside her daughter and pulled her close. "She'll always be here. In this cabin. In the stone beneath our feet. In the warmth that comes when it gets cold. In the way the wind sounds different when it moves through the pines. She's part of this place now." Lily looked up at her mother with eyes that held far too much understanding for an 8-year-old. Do you think she's happy? That we stayed? Amanda thought about the journal entry. About Julia's final plea for forgiveness. About a mother who'd prepared a dark place in the cold for her daughter, resigned to losing her. And about the gift that had been left behind. The generator that kept running, the food that stayed fresh, the warmth that persisted. I think she's at peace, Amanda said finally. I think she knows her story didn't end in tragedy. It ended with us. That evening, as the sun descended behind the ridge and painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, Amanda and Lily sat together in front of the wood stove. The fire crackled steadily, sending warmth through the restored cabin. Outside, the world was moving toward autumn. The season was already shifting, the summer heat beginning to fade, the nights growing longer, the first hint of cold returning to the mountain air. You kept the flame alive, Mom, Lily said, watching the fire. Amanda was quiet for a moment, thinking about everything that had led to this. The desperate bid at the auction, the walk through the blizzard, the discovery of the cellar, Julia's presence in the warm corner, the red scarf tied to the chimney, the impossible smoke that had drawn the rescuers. No, honey, she said finally, her voice soft. They did. Julia and Ethan. They built this place, stocked it, prepared for the worst. They left messages in the dark, hoping someone would find them and understand. And they kept that generator running, somehow, across 35 years. Kept the warmth alive in the stone. Kept the flame ready. She pulled Lily closer. We just listened. We just had the wisdom to accept help when it came, even when that help came from people who'd been dead for most of our lives. We didn't save ourselves, baby. We were saved. Lily leaned against her mother, her small body warm and solid and real. Outside, the wind began to rise through the pines, gentle now, carrying the scent of summer ending and autumn beginning. Not the angry, threatening wind of winter, but something softer. Something that almost sounded like voices. Amanda listened to it move through the trees and across the cabin's roof. She listened to it whisper through the spaces where wind found purchase, and she heard in it a kind of peace. A kind of completion. You made it, the wind seemed to say. You both made it. Amanda closed her eyes and held her daughter, and in the warmth of the restored cabin, surrounded by the memory of the Mayfields and the hope of spring that would come again, she finally allowed herself to believe that they had survived not just the winter, but everything. That their story, hers and Lily's, had found its home in the stone and the soil and the wind and the fire. That they belonged here now as much as Julia and Ethan did. That the cabin would remember them as it had remembered those who came before. The flame burned on into the evening, steady and warm and alive. Outside, the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. And beneath the cabin in the stone chamber, a generator hummed softly, ancient and impossible and exactly as it should be, keeping the promise that had been made decades ago. Keep the flame alive. And they would. Amanda and Lily and the cabin and the mountain. They would keep it alive, not just through the coming winter, but through all the winters after that. They would keep it alive for anyone who came seeking shelter, seeking understanding, seeking proof that love persists and preparation matters and that sometimes, if you listen carefully enough, the dead can speak to the living. They would keep the flame alive. Forever. Tell me in the comments, would you have stayed in that cabin, or would you have run? And subscribe for more mysteries that will haunt you.